If high-speed rail were to thrive anywhere in America, this would undoubtedly be the place for it. Stretching beneath this line lies a vast population of nearly 20 million people, with 6.5 million in the bustling Miami metropolitan area, another 3 million in the vibrant Tampa metro, and an additional 2.5 million in the enchanting Orlando region. It's an urban tapestry that, by American standards, is densely woven, providing the perfect backdrop for a high-speed rail network to take root. With each of these three major metro areas situated within approximately 200 miles or 320 kilometers of each other, they're tantalizingly close yet frustratingly far apart for efficient travel. Flying between them can be cumbersome, and navigating the often congested highways of the interstate system for hours on end can be a real headache. But the reasons for travel between these vibrant hubs are aplenty. From the pristine beaches along the East Coast to the bustling business districts surrounding Tampa Bay, from the cultural vibrancy emanating from Miami to the enchanting entertainment offerings of Orlando, there's an irresistible draw that beckons tourists, in-state adventurers, and Florida's bustling business community to traverse from one city to another. And when you examine the geographical landscape, you'll find there's hardly anything obstructing the path for these rails. No imposing mountain ranges, no daunting canyons, no insurmountable physical barriers requiring Herculean engineering feats. In essence, it's a relatively straightforward canvas on which to create a modern transportation masterpiece. Of course, this pursuit of high-speed rail isn't a novel concept. Dating back to the 1980s, both Floridians and federal planners have been scrutinizing maps, crunching numbers, and pitching the idea of connecting Tampa, Orlando, and Miami via a swift and seamless train route. However, despite multiple attempts, no public-private partnership managed to bring this vision to fruition in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, or even the 2010s. But shortly after the most recent public-private partnership faltered on Governor Rick Scott's desk in 2011, another high-speed rail proposal emerged, equal parts exciting and ambitious. Enter All Aboard Florida, launched in 2012 with the audacious promise that, for a mere $1 billion, it would have a passenger service connecting South Florida to Orlando up and running by 2014. Much like its predecessors, All Aboard Florida faced cost overruns and substantial delays, but it distinguished itself by eventually opening its doors to real rail passengers in 2018. It was a watershed moment, as it became the first fully private, high-speed rail service of its kind in the United States. The initial service rollout was modest, falling short of the grand vision of 230 miles or 370 kilometers of track connecting Central and South Florida's major metro areas. Discounted tickets priced at just $10 or $15 launched on January 13, 2018, offering a journey not from Orlando to Miami but a shorter hop from Fort Lauderdale to West Palm Beach. Although the service later expanded to cover the 66 miles or 110 kilometers between West Palm Beach and Miami, it still fell short of high-speed rail criteria, maxing out at 79 miles or 130 kilometers per hour. Nevertheless, the fact that Brightline, as it came to be known after rebranding, commenced operations in 2018 marked a significant rarity in the United States, an actual passenger rail project that transitioned from concept to reality. High-speed or even higher-speed rail represents a monumental long-term investment, and Brightline was no exception. What set Brightline apart was its parent company, Florida East Coast Industries, which conveniently owned the Florida East Coast Railway. While other contenders would need to negotiate and lease a rail corridor, Brightline already had access to the very railroad that had been instrumental in shaping South Florida a century ago. However, having access to a rail corridor was just the first step in this ambitious endeavor. To offer frequent and fast service, Brightline needed to lay an entirely new set of tracks across more than two-thirds of the 66-mile corridor. This double-tracking process, while relatively straightforward, consumed both time and resources. The challenge intensified when the rail needed to cross rivers and canals. While these waterways already had bridges, most were designed for single tracks, necessitating extensive replacement work. In sections where existing rail could be repurposed, alignment modifications were essential. This involved manually adjusting tracks to accommodate passenger trains traveling twice as fast as the freight trains they were originally designed for. These rail alterations, along with signaling upgrades and siding adjustments, demanded 3 years of relentless effort by the company. But it wasn't just about readying the rails. Brightline needed to establish modern stations from the ground up. Negotiating agreements and connections with local municipalities and their mass transit systems was just as crucial. Each station was meticulously designed to exude a contemporary feel and offer services beyond mere transit stops. The crown jewel was the Miami Central Station, sprawling over 9 acres or 4 city blocks. This multifaceted station boasted elevated platforms, an array of restaurants and shops, approximately 300 parking spots, and 2 38-story towers housing 800 apartments. Achieving an hour and 15-minute journey from Miami to West Palm Beach at a reasonable cost of $25 to $50 one-way took Brightline a total of 6 years. This involved navigating the labyrinthine intricacies of municipal and federal environmental impact statements, railway alignments, and multi-million-dollar construction projects. And that was just Phase 1. Undeterred by delays and cost overruns, Brightline embarked on constructing a cutting-edge station connected to the Orlando International Airport. In the fall of 2023, the service from Miami to Orlando finally opened its doors to the public, marking a significant milestone. Brightline shows no signs of slowing down, as it has already initiated work on Phase 3, which will link Orlando to Tampa. However, Brightline's most substantial obstacle wasn't engineering or construction, it was the fact that it wasn't merely another passenger rail project. It was an American passenger rail project, and securing significant political support for such ventures is a formidable challenge in today's climate. Brightline adopted a novel approach. Publicly, it presented itself as a fully private, capitalistic entity developing a service driven by the free market, with no risk to taxpayers. Privately, though, it worked closely with state and federal governments to realize what politicians had been unable to achieve for decades. Buried deep within the Internal Revenue Service's tax code, in the 500s of approximately 4,000 pages, are sections that outline strict parameters for private activity bonds, PABs. On page 555, Part A of Section 142 specifically opens the door for high-speed intercity rail as eligible issuers of PABs. PABs are a straightforward concept. Companies often issue bonds to raise funds for large projects requiring substantial initial investments. They repay bondholders in installments, plus interest, effectively paying back more than the bond's purchase price over time. This approach allows companies to reduce their annual payments to an amount lower than their expected revenue. However, bondholders must pay taxes on the income generated by bond interest, except when they buy government bonds. Governments often issue tax-exempt bonds that pay interest but grant buyers the privilege of not paying taxes on that interest. This permits governments to offer lower-than-average interest rates, saving money while still attracting enough bond buyers to meet their funding needs. Private activity bonds, on the other hand, are a unique exception. They qualify as tax-exempt bonds, but only if the government approves them. The government assesses whether a private company is engaging in a venture that serves the public interest and merits tax incentives, such as passenger rail development. Many private sector entities seized the opportunity following an expansion of eligibility and issuances in 2005. For instance, Centerpoint raised $225 million through PABs to construct the largest inland port in the United States near Chicago, serving as a pivotal hub connecting the nation's truck and rail freight networks. While Centerpoint specializes in building, operating, and selling intermodal logistics hubs, this particular venture presented an opportunity to do so at a reduced cost. In the federal government's eyes, foregoing tens of millions in tax revenue was a worthwhile trade-off to strengthen the country's freight transportation network, even if it proved profitable for a private enterprise. The rationale was that improved freight logistics would ultimately boost the national tax base. However, private activity bonds can blur the line between public and private endeavors. For example, the greater Louisville, Kentucky area had long grappled with traffic congestion, exacerbated by its location along the expansive Ohio River. To address this issue, 2 states and the federal government collaborated on a bridge project, ultimately entrusting a consortium composed of Vinci and BBGI, 2 global infrastructure investment giants, with its construction and operation. This consortium issued $677 million in private activity bonds to finance the bridge's construction, and now, with the bridge operational, they are repaying these bonds using toll revenue collected through a long-term operating agreement extending until 2051. From the public's perspective, this arrangement doesn't appear particularly distinctive, as the bridge functions like any other toll bridge in the country. Another example of private sector involvement in American infrastructure can be found a couple of hours to the northwest. A section of state highway required upgrading to meet federal interstate standards and become part of the New Mexico to Canada I-69 corridor. The state enlisted a private company not only to construct the road but also to operate it. This company issued $244 million in PABs to finance the construction. Remarkably, there are no tolls for drivers using this section of interstate. To the public, it appears to be a toll-free stretch of highway like any other. Behind the scenes, however, Indiana is paying tens of millions annually in so-called availability payments to the company for its services, allowing the company to repay its bonds. Brightline, or rather an affiliated company with shared ownership and branding, is taking a page from this playbook and applying it to a new region, Los Angeles to Las Vegas. Just as with their Florida route, this corridor represents an attractive travel corridor in the Sunbelt, characterized by its tourist appeal and relatively low construction costs due to the sparse desert terrain between the 2 cities. In this more progressive region, Brightline garnered deeper public support and secured billions in state and federal grants, further accelerated by the prospect of the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles and the company's audacious promise to complete the project by then. Brightline West now stands as the second private passenger rail project in 21st century America with a high likelihood of becoming a reality, so much so that the Biden administration is already touting its role in the project. However, Brightline's success in building a passenger rail service in a matter of years, both in Florida and elsewhere, is attributed to its focus on the most accessible opportunities. They've chosen to develop service where travel time spans 3 to 4 hours between 2 prosperous, tourist-centric locations, creating a substantial demand while benefiting from favorable geographic conditions, such as existing rail alignments or open desert landscapes that reduce construction costs. In essence, they've strategically positioned passenger trains where they have the highest probability of profitability, aligning with sound business principles. Yet, this approach poses a fundamental question: why isn't Amtrak, the national rail operator, pursuing these high-demand corridors and leveraging their profits to support less lucrative routes? The answer lies in the public perception of passenger rail. In an ideal world, Amtrak or another national rail operator would reap the profits from busy routes like Miami to Orlando or Los Angeles to Las Vegas and use those funds to sustain operations on less traveled, more expensive routes like Idaho Falls to Salt Lake City. This model mirrors the way public resources are allocated for highways, where the revenue generated by high-traffic routes supports less profitable, remote areas. However, this approach has yet to materialize in the American passenger rail landscape. Passenger rail should be viewed as a public service rather than a profit-driven enterprise. Roads, another public service, are constructed based on the principle of serving the public good, not solely for profitability. If every road were converted to a fee-based model, where users paid according to their usage, some busy roads would indeed prove profitable. However, many less traveled routes would fail to sustain themselves financially. In the current system, taxpayer revenue collectively funds road construction and maintenance, accepting the cross-subsidization of unprofitable rural roads to facilitate economic activity. Passenger rail should adopt a similar ethos. An effective rail system should use profits from high-demand, cost-effective corridors to offset losses incurred on low-demand, expensive routes. This approach enhances social and economic mobility, stimulates national economic growth, and offers benefits that extend beyond the passengers using high-demand routes. It justifies the profitability of these routes, contributing to the costs of servicing less lucrative ones. In reality, though, the emergence of private sector passenger rail projects, like Brightline, may inadvertently diminish the potential for the development of a comprehensive national passenger rail network. Private initiatives tend to focus on the most profitable routes, narrowing the scope of what a national rail operator like Amtrak could accomplish. However, Amtrak has had ample time to develop robust services on these high-demand routes but has failed to do so. Brightline's success, especially its early indicators of success, should serve as a turning point in public sentiment towards passenger rail development. With 190,000 passengers traveling on the new Miami to Orlando service within its first 70 days of operation, and increasing monthly averages following an increase in frequency to 16 daily trains in each direction, the momentum is undeniable. Moreover, the West Palm Beach to Miami segment reached operational profitability in just a few years, and the long-distance segment to Orlando is poised to follow suit in the coming years. This progress has buoyed the expansion of affiliated companies into other regions, benefiting from increased public support and the allocation of state and federal grants. While this may be just the faintest glimmer of an American passenger rail renaissance, it is nonetheless a promising beginning. The United States has a considerable distance to cover to catch up with other affluent nations in terms of passenger rail infrastructure. The success of private sector initiatives may play a crucial role in shifting public opinion and reducing resistance to nationwide, publicly funded rail development. Brightline and similar ventures showcase how adjusting the underlying business model can yield different, potentially transformative results. Though it is still a small start, it holds the potential to spark a passenger rail renaissance that future generations might look back on as the catalyst for significant change in American transportation. And that concludes our session today, everyone. If this video sparked your interest, please hit the like button and share it with your buddies. For those craving more fascinating stories about the future, check out these videos and keep following Curious Minds Hub.